What happens when a humble teacher is dismissed by a global superstar? This is the story of Mrs. Carter, a dedicated educator who faced laughter but turned it into motivation. Her journey from a small classroom to creating a worldwide movement is nothing short of extraordinary. But the most surprising twist? The very person who laughed at her becomes her greatest ally. Stay tuned to witness how Mrs. Carter's lessons transformed the lives of thousands and left even Snoop Dogg speechless. In a bustling urban high school, Mrs. Elaine Carter, a dedicated teacher in her mid-40s, was known for her innovative teaching methods and deep commitment to her students. Despite working with limited resources in an underfunded school, she strived to inspire her students to dream big. Her classroom walls were covered in motivational posters, student projects, and a hand-painted banner that read, "Knowledge is power." One day, as part of a school outreach program, the administration invited local celebrities to speak about the importance of education. Among the guests was Snoop Dogg, who agreed to attend as a favor to the community. When Snoop entered the school, he was greeted with excitement from students and staff. During a break in the event, Mrs. Carter approached him. "Mr. Dogg, it's such an honor to have you here. I'd love for you to visit my classroom and speak to my students about perseverance and education." Snoop smirked, his tone light but dismissive. "Me? Teach kids about education? That's not really my thing, lady. I'm about entertainment, not school lessons." The nearby crowd chuckled, and Snoop, with a laugh, walked away. Mrs. Carter stood there, the sting of his words sharp, but instead of letting it dishearten her, she decided to turn the moment into motivation. That night, Mrs. Carter sat at her desk, reflecting on the encounter. If he doesn't see the value in education, she thought, then I'll just have to prove him wrong by showing what it can achieve. What Mrs. Carter didn't realize was that her determination would spark a series of events that would transform not just her classroom, but countless lives beyond it. After the encounter with Snoop Dogg, Mrs. Carter resolved to make an even bigger impact on her students' lives. She knew their potential wasn't limited by their environment. It was limited by the opportunities they were given. That realization led to her bold new project, the Visionaries Program. Mrs. Carter transformed her classroom into a hub of innovation and empowerment. She launched the Visionaries Program to teach students not only academics, but also life skills like leadership, problem-solving, and entrepreneurship. Using her personal savings and donations from local businesses, she purchased secondhand laptops and transformed a corner of the classroom into a mini innovation lab. Her goal was to give students the tools to explore their passions, from creating art to coding their own apps. The program also included guest speakers, local business leaders, artists, and activists who shared their journeys to success. If they can see what's possible, Mrs. Carter told her colleagues, they'll know they can achieve it too. The program began to gain attention within the school. Students who once skipped classes or showed little interest in learning started attending regularly. They created projects that tackled real-world issues, like building an app to help the elderly access community services and starting a school garden to address local food insecurity. Word of the program spread beyond the school, drawing the attention of local media. A reporter visited Mrs. Carter's classroom and published an article titled, "One Teacher's Mission to Change Lives." Meanwhile, Snoop Dogg's publicist, Denise, came across the article. She showed it to Snoop, saying, "This is the teacher you brushed off. Looks like she's making waves." Snoop glanced at the article, intrigued. "That's the same lady?" he asked. "Yep," Denise replied. "And her program's getting a lot of attention. Might want to keep an eye on this one." As Mrs. Carter's program gained momentum, she began planning an ambitious event, a school-wide showcase where students could present their projects to community leaders, parents, and local influencers. Unbeknownst to her, one of the attendees would be someone she hadn't expected to see again. The day of the school-wide showcase arrived, and the energy in the air was electric. Students dressed in their best outfits stood proudly beside their projects, ready to present their work to a packed auditorium of parents, community leaders, and local influencers. Mrs. Carter had spared no effort in organizing the event. Colorful banners adorned the school hallways, and a large sign in the auditorium read, "The Visionaries Program, where dreams take flight." As the event began, students stepped up one by one to share their projects. A group of students showcased a mobile app they had designed to help struggling readers improve their literacy skills. Another team presented a recycling initiative that had already reduced the school's waste by 30%. The audience erupted into applause after each presentation, moved by the creativity and passion of the students. Mrs. Carter stood at the back of the room, her heart swelling with pride. Midway through the showcase, whispers rippled through the crowd. Standing at the entrance of the auditorium, dressed in a sleek black hoodie and gold chain, was Snoop Dogg. Mrs. Carter noticed him immediately. Her initial reaction was surprise, but she quickly composed herself and approached him. "Mr. Dogg," she said warmly, "welcome to our showcase. I didn't expect to see you here." Snoop nodded, looking around the room with genuine interest. "I heard about what you've been doing here. Figured I should check it out for myself." As Snoop moved through the room, he listened to students explain their projects, nodding thoughtfully and asking questions. One student, a shy boy named Kevin, showed him a solar-powered portable charger he had built from scrap materials. "That's dope," Snoop said, his tone sincere. "You made this all by yourself?" Kevin beamed. "With Mrs. Carter's help. She taught us how to think big and not give up." Snoop glanced at Mrs. Carter, who was standing nearby, her expression a mix of pride and humility. For the first time, he saw the impact of her work up close. At the end of the showcase, Snoop approached Mrs. Carter. "You're doing something real special here," he said. "I think it's time we had a proper conversation." Mrs. Carter raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I'm listening." Snoop grinned. "Let's talk about taking this to the next level." Snoop Dogg and Mrs. Carter sat down in her modest classroom after the showcase. The students had all gone home, but the energy from the event still lingered in the air. Snoop leaned forward, his usual swagger replaced by sincerity. "Mrs. Carter, what you've built here is powerful. These kids, they're the future, and you're showing them they can be more than what the world tells them. I want to help take this program to the next level." Mrs. Carter listened carefully. "What exactly do you have in mind, Mr. Dogg?" "Call me Snoop," he said with a grin. "And I'm talking about expanding this, making it bigger. Let's take the Visionaries Program national. Get it into schools that need it the most." Over the next few months, Snoop and Mrs. Carter worked tirelessly to turn their vision into reality. They launched an initiative called Dream Big Academy, modeled after the Visionaries Program. The goal was to provide underfunded schools with resources, mentorship, and workshops focused on creativity, leadership, and problem-solving. Snoop used this platform to attract sponsors, while Mrs. Carter developed a curriculum that could be easily adapted to different schools. Together, they created a scholarship fund for students with outstanding projects, ensuring financial barriers wouldn't hold them back. The inaugural Dream Big Academy event was held in Atlanta, bringing together students, teachers, and community leaders from across the country. The event featured workshops led by industry professionals, panels with successful entrepreneurs, and a showcase where students could present their projects. Mrs. Carter stood on stage, addressing a crowd of over 1,000 people. This program started in one classroom with one dream: to show students that their ideas matter. Today, we're proving that when we invest in our youth, the possibilities are endless. The audience erupted into applause as Snoop took the stage next. "I came here thinking I had nothing to do with education," he said. "But Mrs. Carter showed me that education is the key to everything. This isn't just about these kids. It's about all of us. Let's keep building." The impact of Dream Big Academy was immediate. Schools across the country adopted the program, and thousands of students gained access to resources that had once seemed out of reach. One student from Detroit built a prototype for a water filtration system and won a National Innovation Award. Another student from Houston launched a tutoring program for younger kids in her community. Stories like these poured in, each one a testament to the power of Dream Big Academy. As the program grew, Mrs. Carter received an invitation to speak at the United Nations about the importance of education and community-driven initiatives. Before she could accept, Snoop approached her with another idea. Let's take this global, Mrs. Carter. The world needs to see what these kids can do. Mrs. Carter smiled. Are you ready for that challenge, Snoop? Snoop grinned. You know I am. The question is, are you? To be continued. In Part 5, Mrs. Carter and Snoop take Dream Big Academy to the global stage, creating a movement that inspires change worldwide. The idea of taking Dream Big Academy to the global stage was daunting but exhilarating. Mrs. Carter and Snoop Dogg, now a dynamic duo of education and influence, began planning their next big move, launching Dream Big World, an international version of the program. Their mission was clear: to provide underprivileged schools around the world with the tools and mentorship to inspire the next generation of changemakers. The inaugural Dream Big World Summit was held in Geneva, Switzerland, drawing educators, students, and leaders from over 50 countries. The event took place in a grand auditorium, with banners displaying the slogan, "Big Dreams Start Everywhere." Mrs. Carter and Snoop stood together on stage as the event kicked off. Mrs. Carter spoke first, her voice filled with emotion. When I started this journey, I was just a teacher trying to make a difference in one classroom. Today, we're here because of the belief that every student, no matter where they're from, deserves a chance to dream big. Snoop followed with his signature charisma. This is about more than education. It's about empowerment. It's about showing these kids that their ideas can change the world. And guess what? They already are. As Dream Big World expanded, incredible stories began to emerge. In Kenya, a student designed a solar-powered lamp to help families without electricity study at night. In Brazil, a group of students created a mobile app to connect farmers with buyers, reducing food waste and improving livelihoods. In India, a young girl started a literacy program for children in her village, teaching dozens of kids to read and write. Each success story became a symbol of what the program could achieve, inspiring more schools to join the movement. The impact of Dream Big World was undeniable. The program was recognized by UNESCO for its contribution to global education, and Mrs. Carter received an award for innovation in teaching. During the awards ceremony, Mrs. Carter gave a heartfelt speech. This is not just my story. It's the story of every student who dared to dream, every teacher who believed in them, and every community that came together to make it possible. Snoop, sitting in the front row, wiped away a tear as the audience gave her a standing ovation. Years later, Mrs. Carter returned to her original classroom for a surprise visit. The walls were still adorned with student projects and motivational posters, but the class was now equipped with modern technology, thanks to Dream Big Academy. She spoke to the students, sharing her journey and encouraging them to dream fearlessly. As she left the school, Snoop was waiting outside, leaning against a car. "Still changing lives, huh?" he said with a grin. Mrs. Carter laughed. "Always." The camera pans out as Mrs. Carter and Snoop drive off, discussing their next initiative to reach even more kids. The words "Dream Big World," inspiring generations, flash across the screen, symbolizing the lasting legacy of their work. Asterisk, Mrs. Carter's journey shows that even in the face of doubt, one person can make a world of difference. From her classroom to the global stage, her dedication and resilience have changed countless lives, and it all started with a dream. What did you think of this incredible story? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll try to reply to as many as I can. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales like this one. See you in the next video. Asterisk.